Hello and welcome to the Sheen Center Online. I'm David Certo, Interim Executive Director. The Archbishop Fulton J. Sheen Center for Thought and Culture is a project of the Archdiocese of New York, the Art Center of the Archdiocese of New York. And today's conversation is part of our ongoing free public streaming content that we're offering while we can't gather in person. As the animated graphic reminded everyone, if you haven't done so already, we strongly encourage you to like us, to subscribe to our YouTube Sheen Talks channel, and to go ahead and click that bell icon so you can be updated on future videos. We also encourage you, if you're able, to consider making a donation to the Sheen Center. And we're happy to report that from now through Thanksgiving, a portion of all our donations will go to the food banks of Catholic Charities. Now, the poet Tennyson once wrote that more things are wrought by prayer than the world dreams of. Today, we'll be talking with filmmaker Megan Harrington, whose new documentary, Pray, tells the story of a man, Father Patrick Peyton, who dreamed of a world wrought by prayer, and who spent his entire life encouraging others to pray that dream into reality. Let's take a look at the trailer.
If I were to tell you this story, you say, you're a liar. Seriously, you can't make it up. You really cannot make it up. It's as simple as that.
A crowd estimated at 500,000 people gathered today in San Francisco's Golden Gate Park. Father Patrick Peyton drew the largest crowd in the history of San Francisco.
I'd like to speak to you about a remarkable man, Father Patrick Peyton.
Father Patrick Peyton.
Patrick Peyton.
Father Patrick Peyton.
Father Patrick Peyton. I know a man who has dedicated his life to teaching others what prayer can do.
People try to describe Father Peyton, and it's almost like trying to carry water in your hands. It slides through.
It was almost unbelievable. You'll be looking around and all these people are here to listen to him.
The energy level was like somebody who was superhuman.
You might be saying with your voice, Hail Mary, full of grace, but your heart is telling God just what I said. Dear God, I love you.
People would be in tears listening to him because he had such a powerful voice. It was just unreal to think that a young boy from the parish was mingling with all the film stars.
He never came back with an American accent. He was always Irish.
He was capable of anything, apparently. We didn't know it at the time.
I want to talk to you about my dear friend and mentor, Father Patrick Peyton.
He was a little bit of a brat when he was a teenager. You know, he was no saint, let me tell you.
I'm for God, for peace, for justice, mercy, truth, love.
He might have gotten knocked down, but he always got up.
I'm for stronger homes and loftier lives and the better use of time.
It was uncanny now, the way that people reacted to his voice. It surely was coming from God.
But first of all, I'm for prayer, family prayer. The family that prays together stays together.
It's my pleasure to welcome the writer-producer of Pray, Megan Harrington. Megan, welcome.
Thank you, David. It's wonderful to be with you.
Oh, thank you for spending some time. And what better day to talk about this film than today? October is the month of the Rosary, and today, October 7th, is the Feast of Our Lady of the Rosary. So can't think of a better day to talk about this wonderful film. It's just a beautiful story. And you know, obviously so many people, whether you're Catholic or not Catholic, have probably heard that phrase, the family that prays together stays together. But I would venture that very few people know a lot about the man behind that phrase. Yours truly being one of them. I had heard of Father Peyton, but I really didn't know much about his life. So did you know a lot about Father Peyton before the film, and why did you feel compelled to tell his story?
No, I was in the exact same boat as you, David. I knew the saying. And I really only knew that Father Peyton said it because I was at a wedding shower and they said to offer the bride advice. And I thought, well, I know my mom has said that, so I'll give that as my words of wisdom. So I was introduced to this project by Family Theater Productions, Father David Guffey, and it has been an incredible gift in my life to get to know Father Peyton. And you yourself, having seen the film, what an extraordinary life that he led with such passion and fervor for his faith, for the love of the Blessed Mother and Jesus Christ. It blew me away. And also Matt Donlan, co-writer, associate producer, and John Cipitti, the director, and John Lewis Kalis, us in the thick of the story, first on paper and then editing, they didn't know Father Peyton either. And I can say, I won't speak for them, but I think it's safe to say he was life-changing for all of us in the way that he believed and promoted and pursued prayer, family prayer especially.
Wow, and we're certainly going to get a little bit into his life. But one thing that I found amazing about his story, among many things, is, Hollywood could not have written a story and people would have believed it. As the man says, I mean, you have this poor kid from rural Ireland, comes to America, an immigrant, and he winds up enlisting, the top celebrities of his day into his cause. And he ends up reaching and speaking and impacting millions of lives. Not only is he an American dream success story, but far more importantly, he was, like our namesake, Archbishop Fulton Sheen, he was an innovator who really understood the potential and the power of the media to spread the gospel. And he really was, along with Fulton Sheen, the new evangelization before there was such a thing as the new evangelization. Can you talk a little bit about his visionary innovativeness in using the technology of his day to evangelize, to spread the gospel? I mean, if he was here today, he'd probably be doing streaming calls like this.
Oh, I was just going to say that. He would have been right on top of all the things that have been happening since this pandemic. How am I going to reach families? How am I going to reach people with the message of prayer? How am I going to entertain them? How am I going to inspire them? He was a visionary. And when he knew his calling from God, when he got that and he knew exactly what he needed to do, and after being healed from tuberculosis, he saw that families were being torn apart. It was World War II. And he said, I know what I was given in my domestic church, his home in Ireland, where his parents set the example of prayer. And he said, that changed my life, and I know that it can change others. So when he set out for his mission to repay his debt of being healed, he's looked at radio. Radio was the thing of the time. And he said, okay, that's how I'm going to get into homes. He starts praying the Rosary. And then he goes to Mutual. And this little kid, like you say, he's from Addie, Mass. He goes to New York City. He's going to meet with the Mutual Broadcasting System. I mean, it's outrageous. And he goes in there and he persuades them. His persuasiveness also, because he knew his purpose and mission, he didn't have any trouble talking to anybody. It didn't matter your state in life, or if you were a celebrity, or if you were a prince or a king or a pope. So he just kept doing and changing with the times, alongside these rallies, these in-person rallies that he did. That coincided with a lot of the radio work. So he just kept finding the way that would reach families, and that evolved as the media of technology evolved. So I also should say that him and Bishop Sheen, he met Bishop Sheen when Bishop Sheen was not yet Bishop Sheen. And Bishop Sheen said, I'll mention the story of the family rosary on my radio show. And I'll offer people a free rosary. So just be ready, Father Peyton, because you probably get 10,000 people who will want it. Well, in 2 weeks after Bishop Sheen mentioned it, 50,000 requests for rosaries came. So those two were friends, and both of them, I think, just incredible media pioneers and wonderful trailblazers.
They sure were, and they knew the power of cross promotion there. I mean, that was
that's right.
Absolutely. I mean, what comes across so wonderful in your film, and I think somebody even says it, one of the folks who were interviewed, that the one word that he didn't have in his vocabulary was no. I mean, he just didn't take no for an answer, but he always said yes to God. Whatever God was leading him, he would figure out a way to say yes. So what I also find is so inspirational is not just his story, which of course is inspirational. Maybe we could get into a little bit of that, particularly the real transformative moment in his life when he was, in the hospital bed with tuberculosis. But it was his approach to evangelizing. It was so positive and hopeful. Secular culture often kind of positions Catholicism as a religion of pessimism or negativity. And I think what is so beautiful is the line where Father Peyton says, I don't have time to talk about what I'm against. I'm too busy talking about what I'm for. And he puts that positive spin on it. And I just want to get the line right. He puts such a hopeful face on faith. And he says, particularly the Rosary, and he says that I am for things like peace, justice, racial harmony, love, truth, stronger homes, loftier lives, everything that ennobles man and exalts women. But first of all, I'm for prayer. Can you talk a little bit about how just that particular approach about trying to live out your faith in a joyful way, in a positive way, was part of the what attracted so many people? I mean, obviously he was gifted with a certain charisma, but it was really that joy of living out his faith that I think was so infectious to so many people.
Oh, when we found that clip, so Matt Donlan had went down, the vault there's a vault and there had been some digitization done. But when we started getting in real deep to the project, just kept going back and looking. And when that was found by our assistant editor, Alex D., literally the whole team had the same reaction you did of like, how timeless is that message of being so overwhelmed and are so focused on what you're for that you don't have time for anything else. And if that could translate into our world today at this moment, I mean, it's a timeless message that he promoted the good, the true, the beautiful. But he was able to do it because he knew in his own life the power of it. He wasn't talking abstractly about how prayer impacted. He wasn't talking abstractly about the joy of living for God and answering his call. He experienced it. It was an experience that he wanted to share because he knew it worked, and he knew it would help people. So it was a beautiful discovery in the process of making the film that I think could play over and over, regardless of the time that we're in, but certainly now.
Oh, there's certainly a timelessness to that statement and many statements that he made, but it also shows, he saw that prayer, in addition to the spiritual importance, had that practical impact. People say, oh, it's nice that you're praying for things, but what can we actually do that's practical? He saw that if people made prayer more central to their lives, it would have the intended effect. It would ennoble men, it would exalt women, it would encourage, love and racial harmony and justice. So he was trying to shine a spotlight in that prayer is not something that is just for saints to do somewhere else. It has practical implications in the real lives of families and communities and even a nation.
Yes, and his life was a prayer in the way he approached everything and believed it wholeheartedly. And it really is a wonderful example for all of us. He's a model, just an everyday model for us to take those words and to make them part of our own lives. Because he didn't just pray. He did, I'm sure, many times very much just and sat and was still, but he was at work as well. He was at work for his mission, for his purpose. So he did everything so prayerfully, but it was prayer in action in many cases for the things that he achieved.
Oh, and he achieved quite a bit. I mean, I remember some of the stats that show, thousands and thousands of letters, hundreds of episodes, So why don't we, before we throw to the first clip, let's give folks who haven't seen the film yet, and I encourage everybody to see it, a little bit of context. So he was from rural Ireland. He came to America wanting to be a millionaire, wanting to, achieve the American dream. But then he also had a calling, a vocation. He winds up in the seminary. He attended Notre Dame, but then he also is seriously sidelined with a bout of tuberculosis, which at the time was, as someone says in the film, almost a death sentence. And he is gravely ill in bed, and set up what happens then.
So he's gravely ill, and he's had it all his last moment in his life. Again, very human. He's like, here I am. I'm about to be a priest. All these things I've worked for and I've longed for, and now I'm not going to be able to achieve that. You know, kind of where is God in all of this? Again, very human. And someone comes into his life, a mentor, Father Haggerty, and an example of how God uses other people to speak words to us. And he says, you know, you have the faith. Your mom gave it to you, and her mother to her. So Mary's a 50%er or a 100%er. So the way you pray to her is going to determine the rest of the story. And when he left, Father Peyton sat there. You know, Father Peyton had a decision to make, and he made the decision to go in and all out and pray to her.
Wow. So this is a clip, and I guess we should say that before we throw to the clip, that your film is there are some of the documentary archival footage and interviews, but then there are also some sort of dramatic recreations. And this is one of those scenes of a young Father Peyton, not yet Father Peyton, in bed with tuberculosis. So if we could roll the first clip.
He totally surrendered.
Mary, I believe you're alive. That you have eyes that smile, that you have eyes that shed tears. Mary, since I could open my mouth, I've said to you that the son you bore is my God. I loved you, now I'm in need. I need you, Mary. I need to be a priest. I want to be one. Deliver me from this crippled body and sickness.
And he didn't have to wait long, because he felt the change physically within him. I'm sure he felt the spiritual peace as well, but he felt a true physical change in his breathing and how his body felt. The challenge was to convince the doctors that it had happened. And so he finally convinces them to rerun the x-rays, and it showed that he had been healed.
Yeah. And what's so amazing is, you know, this was not some, 50-50 case that he had. I mean, the doctors had pretty much written him off and said that his lungs were so damaged that it was very unlikely that he was going to survive. So to have this miraculous, cure was nothing short of that. I mean, it really was miraculous. Even the doctors felt that.
Oh, absolutely. And another thing to point out is he's in bed for a year. So it wasn't as though, it was just a couple days and then he got better. I mean, he struggled with the disease for a long time. And while the change was immediate when he was healed, like that decision to go all in on prayer, he suffered a great deal for a very long time.
Yeah. And, it's your comment about, and says it in the film about how Father Haggerty had said, it's up to you. You have the faith. You're either gonna trust in the Lord, kind of 50%, or you gotta be all in. Reminded me of a quote that I had read once. I think it was Corrie ten Boom, who had said that, is your prayer a steering wheel or is it a spare tire? Are you just going to use it in the emergencies, or is it going to really be the thing that directs and drives your whole life? And I think that was a moment where, he came from a very devout family and prayer was always a part of his life. But I think that was really a transformative moment, not just physically, but that he realized moving forward, his prayer life was going to be that steering wheel for the rest of his life.
Oh, that's a great way to describe it.
There was a recent survey, I think back over the summer, that said that, despite ongoing secularization, that Americans still were, by and large, generally prayerful people, that America was a nation that believed in prayer. And they pointed out that that has certainly only increased as we've continued to deal with this tragic pandemic, that many people who are either suffering themselves or know people who are impacted have certainly turned to prayer. Do you think Father Peyton's story is even more relevant now in this moment, given the suffering that we as a city, as a nation, and even as a world are facing.
I absolutely do. We thought that, a couple of years ago when creating the film, but this time that we're in and the temptation to turn to other things besides prayer, to really as a family get on our knees and give thanks to God and make that the priority. I hope this film can deliver that message of hope, that there is so much hope in prayer. And much like the pandemic of his time that he survived, prayer got him through it. World War II, families were torn apart. This is a time when families are sheltering in place and have this opportunity to give to their children as well. If they have a family, that gift of a mom and a dad in prayer changed his life. Is it a wonderful opportunity? I hope that film will trigger that love of prayer in whatever state of life you're in, but especially family prayer, and most especially the Rosary.
Yeah, and I think it's certainly, it's certainly a wonderful vehicle to encourage that in families, and I love the way that throughout the film, again, it doesn't just tell Father Peyton's story; it also tells in little vignettes and profiles the stories of individual families and how either Father Peyton's direct relationship with that family, or in other cases, just them, reading about him or learning about him, really had meaningful impact on these various families. I think that was a very effective way of showing not just Father Peyton's impact, but what he was trying to encourage, the impact of prayer on real people's lives.
Yeah, and it was a very intentional decision and a difficult one to weave together, because you're telling a biography, and certainly he's in the past, to get the modern families who are impacted by his legacy was very important to us as a team, to show that while he isn't here now, he's still championing families. People are still impacted by his message, still attracted to his goodness and his purity and his humility. It's still alive, much like Fulton Sheen and the Sheen Center. And look at the legacy that has been created and lingers on in powerful ways in people's lives. They're gone, but they're here and they're active. And it was really incredible to see that with the families that we interviewed.
How did you select? Did you have a number of families and you have to sort of narrow it down, or what was the selection process, and how did you find these families?
Well, Father David Marcham runs the Father Peyton Prayer Guild, and he is the vice postulator for Father Peyton's cause. And so he receives a lot of letters from families who are impacted by Father Peyton and his legacy. So we found a great deal of those families through him and through letters. And we had to geographically also pick them because everything has a budget. And if we were going to be in Boston, we had the family on the Cape, the McAtees, looking at families in that area who had a story that was impacted by family prayer, Rosary, Father Peyton in the McAtees case very directly. The Leonards, their dad and their mom and the kids, they're in Albany, New York. They knew him personally.
Yeah.
And so, and they still do a family Rosary 50 years later, that to celebrate the healing of their father. Of course, this year it's not able to happen because of the pandemic, but there was a lot of help locating these families because a lot of legacy did exist.
Well, it certainly seems there might have been effort to locate them, but once you did locate them, it seemed like they were only too willing to talk about Father Peyton. Obviously, the affection for him came across in their telling. You talked a little bit about the wonderful legacy, not only his life, but his legacy. Part of his legacy is Family Theater Productions, and it was the way that he was constantly trying to figure out how he could reach more and more people. Can you talk a little bit about Family Theater Productions, how it was founded, why it was founded, but more importantly, like Father Peyton, Family Theater Productions has also evolved along with the media landscape to continue to meet the needs of an increasingly media diverse audiences. So could you talk a little bit about that and where it started and where it is now?
Yes, so Family Theater Productions founded by Father Peyton, 1947, still is in the heart of Hollywood today. Started with radio dramas, and that's where you see those big stars of the day come in. He tackled issues of the time, or the marriage. They were set in dramas and focused on radio. And again, as you said, as things evolved and we moved into the medium of television and film, Father Peyton started to evolve, and his mission started to evolve. But the core of it, always and still today, is educate, inspire, and entertain, and really focused on family. We want to be a place where you can go and say, I can watch this particular program. I can watch this short video, because now we're doing short form content as well. And I can watch this with my family. We can have a discussion. We can, sometimes it's just for entertainment, but always with the purpose of the true, the good, and the beautiful. And I think in this time as well, we talk about the times, family content is very much needed, something that the whole family can watch together and each person can get something from it.
Well said, and absolutely important. We were talking before we went live just about some of those more recognizable faces in some of those old clips. It's amazing. I mean, he sort of navigated a who's who in Hollywood back then, as did, again, our namesake Fulton Sheen. And it was amazing back then, the intersection of popular entertainment. I mean, whether it was Jimmy Stewart or James Cagney, Lucille Ball, Father Peyton gave James Dean his first on-camera acting role. And it certainly speaks volumes about, just where we are today as popular culture. Like, you can't imagine, I can't imagine, a lot of celebrities lining up to do a public service announcement for a priest encouraging, families saying the Rosary today. Although I'm sure there are some who would, but it really does sort of capture that historical moment where, the church and culture were much more intersecting than they are now.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, it was a different time. You can always say that, and there's good things and bads, and things evolve, but they really did. Both Fulton Sheen and Father Patrick Peyton had this ability to connect with those rich and famous, and just encourage them to be part of the mission, encourage them to do something good for families, to do something good through media. And I do think, like you said, I do think there still are people out there who would champion that call and who would join that mission. But it does make you think, and we've heard that before, of like, where is that star of today, or why is that so different now? And it's just a different time, and there were different regulations and restrictions and so many different variables. But it's something we can long for and pursue again.
Absolutely. And well, I mean, that's why, apostolates, whether it's Family Theater Productions or the Sheen Center, I mean, we really try to be a locus of where faith and culture can intersect. And my experience is there's been many people on the, secular side of the aisle who are all too willing to engage faith audiences in conversation. So I think, while it's certainly a different era, I think there is certainly reasons to hope that, we can find those areas to come together and celebrate the true, the good, and the beautiful, which is our mission statement. We have a second clip, and maybe to set it up, while Father Peyton certainly accomplished a lot, perhaps one of the things he was most remembered for were these massive prayer rallies. So we'll talk a little bit about that, but let's show the clip first.
Dear mothers of children, wives, on whose kindness and whose graciousness and whose sanctity men's salvation maybe depends, men whom women have trusted your integrity, trusted your purity, trusted your manliness, not for a day, but for a lifetime. Make your wife glad forever that she had a husband like you. To make your daughter and your son remember forever with joy that they had a father like you. Men that have the power to bring our holy God into the home that you live in. If you will do it.
Again, so beautiful and so timely. little earlier in the summer, we had several virtual events like this. One of them was obviously dealing with the civil unrest and the continuing important questions about racial justice. And the question was posed to one of the speakers, what role can Christians play in this conversation, and what can they do? And I thought she had a beautiful response. She said, just be better Christians, actually live up to your calling. And I think that's what Father Peyton was saying so eloquently there, to parents to take their roles as parents seriously within their own domestic churches of their homes. Can you talk a little bit about those prayer rallies? I mean, I know some of the numbers that you mentioned in your film were amazing. There was one in San Francisco that at the time had been the largest gathering ever in San Francisco. There was another one in the Philippines that was also record breaking. I mean, these were not small little events. He gathered crowds, on an epic scale.
It's one of the more astounding things when you look at his life and you see the pictures of, in some cases, millions of people gathered. And the interesting thing to know, I mean, he was very tactical, and he had a team behind him, like anything. The Sheen Center making this film, there's a whole team of people that are at work to make sure that these are a success, that people are aware. So he did a lot of groundwork. He'd go in weeks in advance to prepare for these rallies. And one thing that he wasn't a good speaker. I mean, many people said that wasn't his gift. But when he got up in front of those crowds, and Dorothy Halloran, who's still alive in her 90s and worked for him, you just couldn't help but be captivated by what he was saying. And in some cases, it was such a plea. Not necessarily one we heard. It was very, he's still very emotional, but some cases, such a plea to pray. Such a plea to people to come together as families for prayer, to make that part of your life. If you're single, that prayer was so important to him. But these rallies brought people. And now think about that too. Like, we live in a day where you can just, hey, we're doing a Facebook Live. This is a lot of work to get 2 million people to show up. That's a lot of flyers. That's a lot of church announcements. That's a lot of door-to-door. Remarkable when you also think about the time period. It's still crazy now, 2 million people in the Philippines. Whenever it is, but also just the time period and the way he used communication. And Father Guffey said this, who runs Family Theater. He was a genius at marketing as well. Very, very strategic. So it's incredible what he achieved. 28 million people, I think second only to Pope John Paul II in the amount of people who saw him in person. And again, traveling at that time, it's not like it is now. It's a very different time.
That is not a bad person to come in second to. I mean, you're in good company.
Yeah, that's right.
That's who bumped you off the top of the list. And not all these times. I mean, I know towards the end of his life, I believe it was it the Philippines, where when he went, at optimum energy, it would have been an impressive feat. But when you have someone who was in ailing health and not at full strength, and he was still able to keep a crowd like that, captivated, then you're starting to get into the realm of there's something else going on here. There's a little bit of the divine here, a lot of the divine here, but he was a marketing genius. He was probably a genius in several regards, but when you listen to him, even in the short, bites that you have in your documentary, it's clear that he was not working, as you said, off talking points. I mean, this was coming from the heart, and there was a genuineness there. And I love how you were able to use the old recordings, because I think part of the power is hearing him say it, not having some actor with a great voice, just try to recreate those speeches. You're actually listening to him, and part of the power is his voice.
Oh, and that, again, very intentional choice to have Father Peyton, in a sense, narrate his own documentary, to narrate his own life. So being able to find those gems was a gift for the production as well. And then have the other people who knew him also play narrator. But it was an intentional choice, because no one better to tell his story than himself. And we were fortunate to have those audio, in some cases, audio and video.
Yeah. Another thing that I think you were very fortunate enough, and I'm sure it took a lot of legwork too, was trying to find some of those childhood friends, because, you see him on this grand world stage, and he's traveling around the globe. But when you see some of the people who knew Father Peyton when he was just young Patrick, and they give a window into that. This guy wasn't a saint. He was up to some mischief as well. He had a girlfriend. It really puts a human face on this larger than life character, and I think that was really important for the documentary.
Oh, I think if anything too that you can gain from Father Peyton's stories, he's very human. Struggles with a temper, wants to be a priest, can't be a priest because he didn't finish school, but also was very competitive to be a priest in that time in Ireland. And his family was very poor, materially poor, but spiritually rich is how he described his life. He didn't have anything easy or given to him. And he didn't leave Ireland and everyone went, well, there goes Pat. He's going to go speak to millions of people and we're going to hear about him for the rest of our life. It was a very human story of a man who, once he knew his calling and his purpose, and he surrendered himself to what God had planned for him, which was not what he had planned for himself, the extraordinary happened. And that's why he's such a wonderful model, I think, in just his humanity and his humility. A very big thing people said many, many times is humility. And isn't that something that we could all look to and say, now that humility will help in all of us in whatever we're pursuing in our life and in our work. He's a wonderful model.
Yeah, humility is not a word that kind of describes our modern culture, and it's certainly one that we could all use. Now, Father Peyton, once he did sort of discern what his life's calling was, set some impressive goals for himself. One of them being that he was going to encourage, 10 million families to pray the Rosary together. And he actually was, as it says in the film, he was aiming low because he certainly encouraged far more than 10 million people. But that was a pretty good number to shoot for. Now, I know part of the reason that you made this film is you wanted to encourage families in a similar way. And I know that you have a certain goals in mind, or what you would hope to see accomplished in this film. Could you talk a little bit about what those goals around the film are?
Yes. So with the launch of the film, we want to revive Father Peyton's goal of getting 10 million individuals to daily family prayer. And so if they're an individual, obviously they pray with themselves or gather community around them, gather others in prayer. We've offered tools and resources to jumpstart that for 35 days. But the 35 days is just to make it a habit, to make that a daily practice. So we want families and individuals to take the pledge. There'll be a pledge. When the film launches October 9th, you'll have access to resources and tools to help with your prayer life. Again, a major focus of that being the Rosary. To allow families to either expand their prayer practices or start the practice of prayer. Because sometimes when we want to do something, we're like, I don't really know how to do that. This is, you saw in the film, this is awkward. I'm not sure. To gather their family around this kit or this program, and everybody's on board and can participate. And the idea would be that families would make that a practice and see that for themselves the tangible benefits of daily family prayer, much like Father did in his life. Again, it's all based off what he knew to be true from what his parents gave him, which was the gift of prayer.
Wow, that's beautiful. And if you want to share some of those resources, we'd be happy to maybe post them on our social media as well around the time of the film, of the release. Now, obviously, Father Peyton, as you said, certainly belonged to an era, but like all people of genius, and in his case, genius and sanctity, his message has a timelessness to it. Based on what you say in your film about Father Peyton, people were obviously drawn to him for his charismatic personality, but I think also, to your point, they were drawn to him for his humility and for his holiness. And as one adoring nun in the film says, he came across as a big-time operator. But there was that authenticity. And because there is such a timelessness to him, his message, his legacy, what do you hope people of today, specifically young people, maybe specifically families and young families, can really still learn from Father Peyton and learn from his message?
Father certainly is the gift of the power of prayer, of surrendering yourself, your family, and uniting them together in prayer. First and foremost, hopefully that families will be attracted to that idea of prayer works. Try it, give it a go. The other thing about Father Peyton, for young people especially, as again we talked about, God takes the most unlikely people to do his work, and to really take time to make prayer part of your life, to make decisions prayerfully. Father Peyton, this he loved today, because he loved to make major decisions on the Feast of the Blessed Mother, to really take time for prayer, and to also, Father Peyton, again, the humility, the surrender, the power of prayer. And everybody was important to Father Peyton. The importance of a thank you note, the importance of being genuinely interested in others and self-sacrificing. And we live in a very sometimes me culture, but he would always drop what he was doing. Dorothy Halloran said this, and if somebody needed a prayer, he'd get on the phone and he'd pray with them. If you gave $1 or you gave $1,000, you're going to get a thank you note, because Father believed in the goodness and that everybody gave as much as they could. So I think he's a human model, because he really came from nothing and became what he was because he put his faith in God, the Blessed Mother, and made prayer the most important thing in his life, which sounds easy to do, but it's difficult. So he really challenges us, I think, to put prayer first. And when putting God first in anything, what miracles can follow.
Wow, I couldn't add anything to that. It was beautifully said. Where can people, now the film is going to be released on October 9th, but where can people see the film, access the film? How can people find out about this?
So Pray, again, it opens October 9th. If you go to praythefilm.com, you'll see a link that see the film, or on the main page, you can go to find a theater. So you can look and try to find a theater near you. If you don't see a theater, please call your local theater and tell them you'd love to see the movie Pray and love to have it come to your city. So we're opening October 9th. We're going to launch the Pray Together Now movement on that day. That will be rolling, that will continue to roll out. And then streaming will be available in January. But if you do see the movie and you're at the theater, please post about it. Please let us know you're out there and seeing it. We'd love to hear your responses. And I genuinely hope I met who I consider a very good friend. He's one of my best friends, and he's been incredible to me in my life. And I hope that when people see this movie, he will become their friend, and they'll go to him and they'll ask for his intercession and his help, and he'll do it. And especially if you have a family, but he's for single people too. I've seen miracles that he's done for me, and I hope that that all who meet him will be able to say, "Oh, now I know that man who said the family that prays together stays together. Now I know him."
Oh, well, that's wonderful. Well, you know, someone once said that if the only prayer you said was the word thank you, that would be enough. So thank you, Megan, for being with us today. And one of my favorite moments in the prayer comes right near the end. Father Guffey from Family Theater Productions, I guess he's trying to sum up some of the lessons that he's learned from Father Peyton's life.
Mm-hmm.
And one of them was, and I want to get the line right here, he says that if something is given to you by God, find a way to do it. Well, I am so glad that God inspired and gave you this opportunity to tell Father Peyton's story, but I'm even more grateful that you found a way to do it. So thank you for being with us today. Thank you for sharing the story of Father Peyton with us. Thank you for sharing the importance of prayer with us. And we will certainly here at the Sheen Center continue to pray for you and your ministry of film. And thank you to our viewers. We hope you enjoyed today's conversation. We certainly enjoyed bringing it to you. As I said at the beginning, please like us, subscribe to our Sheen Talks YouTube channel, and click the icon for updates on future videos. And again, if you can, please consider making a donation to the Sheen Center, particularly during these challenging times. As Megan certainly reminded us, any amount, no matter how small, when done with love, will always make a huge difference. So until next time, stay safe, be well, God bless.